Hey, it's Matthew from That's Matthew, and you're watching Disney Channel. I've always wanted to do that. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of That's So Matthew. Today, I am super excited because it is our first episode of my spooky season series for October, where we're going to talk about all these awesome Halloween Disney Channel original movies. And today, I have a super awesome guest as well. Introduce yourself to the listeners.
Hello, everyone. I am somereview_dude on Instagram. And I post a variety of content regarding nostalgia. So, yeah, you can find me there.
Awesome. I am so excited to have you on again. We have done several episodes in the past. Let's see, True Confessions, Hatching Pete, Quint, even Steven's movie. So I'm so excited to have you on for Phantom of the Megaplex today, which is a very interesting DCOM. I feel like it's a kind of an underrated one, in my opinion. I feel like we don't talk too much about it as a Halloween DCOM. So I'm really excited, and I was really excited when you had picked this one to talk about.
Yeah, this one is one of my higher favorites of the, I want to say, spooky DCOMs.
Yeah, me too. I feel like
between...
Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say it's not as talked about as a lot of the other ones.
Yeah, I was just about to say, like, with Halloween Town and like Twitches, I feel like this one definitely gets overlooked. But I'm so excited to talk about it. It came out in 2000. I actually recorded a DCOM earlier, or an episode earlier today, about The Color of Friendship, which also came out in 2000, which is super cool. And so it is produced by Disney Channel. As you know, it's a Disney Channel original movie and is actually kind of loosely based off of The Phantom of the Opera, which is a movie, musical, and novel that came out in 1910. Musical is currently playing on Broadway. There was a movie adaptation a couple years back. So I honestly, because I am like a theater person, I thought that was like super cool, like to have that aspect and to have like the score, because the score for the movie kind of has those Phantom of the Opera organ aspects at the beginning and in the end. So I thought that was super cool. And honestly, I hadn't seen this movie in probably like 5 years before we recorded this episode.
Yeah, this is my second time watching it. Yeah, I didn't expect to remember reliking it. And I challenged myself to watch the entire thing with subtitles and put it in a different language, because sometimes I can doze off when I'm like watching things intently. So I funnily enough, I watched the entire thing in Japanese, which helped my study a little bit. It was an interesting perspective.
I think that is actually super cool, because I will do that like for like over the summer, like when I'm not taking my French classes, I will just like watch like a random like show or something and then like put the subtitles on and then like have that audio like you said. So that is super cool. And this movie is also 21 years old, which kind of is like a little crazy. I don't know, because it doesn't feel like a 2000 DCOM. It feels kind of more recent, if that makes sense, with like the story and like the aspects of this movie.
Yeah, I can sort of see what you mean there.
Yeah. So honestly, before we get into our characters, I'll just give you a brief summary. So we have Taylor Hanley is playing Pete Riley, who is an assistant manager at a movie theater, and there are all these strange and mysterious happenings at this megaplex on the premiere of a movie called Midnight Mayhem. So that's a very, very brief overview. We will get into the details, as you know we do here on the podcast. So up first, we're going to talk about Pete Riley, who is essentially the main character of this movie. I'm going to be honest, it was like kind of weird for me because I didn't like love him, but I feel like he had like such a good connection like with the other two main characters of this movie that it like made it better because I feel like his character didn't have like so much to go off of being the main character. I feel like usually we'll get like a storyline or two. And for me, it just felt like
Mhm.
he was kind of like more of a bland protagonist, but with his energy like bouncing off the others, I feel like it worked a lot more, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, especially in the middle and end parts of the movie. I can see what you mean there.
Yeah,
Like
I
it was
just
a little rough at the beginning.
it was a little rough. I feel like this movie also had a sort of like slow like pick up into the plot like and action of the movie. It was a little bit of a slow burn for me. And
Yeah, I can see what you mean.
yeah. So yeah, Pete was one of I would honestly say like I didn't like love his like character like much going on if that like makes sense, but I also did like him as a character. So what did you think about him?
For a protagonist perspective, I'd say for decom standards, he's pretty fine. Like no complaints there. But a character point of view, maybe a little bit more. I mean, I know he was his whole point was he was a teen overworking himself at the theater, and character development wise, I think they did a decent job there, but a little bit more would have been nice to see, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm
A little bit.
totally right there with you. It just did feel a little lacking in those like different areas. But nonetheless, like you said, a good protagonist. So our next character is Karen Riley, who is his younger sister. He or she is one of the main characters. And I honestly would say that she was not like my favorite as well. I feel like her energy of like just being that 13-year-old sister, kind of like teenage sister, worked well in that sense, but we don't like see her like get like crazy stuff. But she's usually hanging out at the movie theater with him, which I think is very interesting. She kind of just goes and watches movies all the time. And then she kind of pieces together this like mystery of the happenings at the Megaplex with like the titles, and they all work together to discover like who this phantom is. And they're able to learn like the plot of this movie. And so I honestly did like her in that sense, like that she was like kind of piecing everything together. And I feel like that was like her most like her main purpose of this movie, if that works.
Yeah, like every time she would sneak off from the one movie, I think it was a horror film. I forgot the name of it in the movie, but she would sneak off uh, from her friends to go check on her younger brother, and then like yeah, it was like typical teenager stuff there until I want to say until I think the younger brother Brian. I want to say who we haven't got to yet, but until he starts pretty much convincing her to do to go with him, and like yeah, I think it helps her.
It did. I did enjoy her. I feel like as well, just like the energy of like the three siblings like bouncing off of each other worked well in that sense. So, which kind of leads me into our next character, Jacob Smith, who is Brian Riley, who is the 10-year-old brother and probably my personal favorite character from this movie. I feel like he had like the most like funny jokes and one-liners like throughout the movie, and it just worked in that sense of kind of making everything work well. He kind of also helped piece together the mystery. He had such a great like interest in the movie theater as well too, which I think really helped. And like he was always hanging out with Pete and trying to fix like the broken projector. And then he helps expose who the phantom is and kind of pieces together the mystery along with Karen and Pete. So, but I just feel like he had a lot going for him, like character wise, which is probably why he's my favorite, if that like kind of makes sense.
Yeah, it's like that childlike innocence that played a large role there.
Mm-hmm. He was young, I think probably like 9 or 10, but it like worked. And I feel like the younger brother like characters in like DComs or Disney shows always are like my favorite. I just feel like they like the jokes and all that going on and like mixed together, usually with a good plot. And he had that good plot. It works very well. So what did you think of Brian?
Um, I almost want to say I agree with you. Like he is one of my favorite characters, but um, like the way the world treated him, like not treated, but oh yeah, I could say treated. Like they looked down upon him because he's a kid, even though most of the time he knew what he was talking about. I'd say most, except for when he got the Phantom wrong. Um, but yeah, I do like him. Um, I think yeah, we'll get there later, but I think I already know who my favorite character is overall.
Awesome. Well, we will get
Yeah.
there. Uh, Next up, we have Mickey Rooney, who is playing Movie Mason, who is kind of the older figure in the movie. He is a movie fan, and his family opened the theater, like the old one, before this megaplex was built. So it's kind of like giving the sense, like maybe like a villain or a ghost vibe from him, because like his family opened this theater before the megaplex was built. So like maybe like the grounds are like haunted or whatever. uh Mason thought that he like works there, but he doesn't, and they kind of make that point very early on in the movie. He comes to the theater practically every day. He's always just hanging around, and they just kind of give off this like kind of creepy vibe from him, like, oh, this old guy just comes and hangs out here, he thinks he works here, he doesn't. And pretty much everyone likes him except for Sean, who we're going to get into in just a minute. But it was just so like weird to kind of have them portray him as a villain, because I thought that like honestly it was just like a super innocent like character, and they try to like make him the villain. But we will find out, and we will talk about who the villain actually is. So honestly, movie Mason was like tried to be made the villain, but I feel like they failed because he was probably one of my favorite characters of the whole movie.
He was my favorite from the whole movie. Just I just like the innocent portrayal of him. He was just trying his best to stay around as long as he could.
Yeah, he just liked the movies. He loves the idea of the movie theater. And so it was just honestly, and also I feel like he just gives off like the creepy, like butler vibes in like a horror movie. Cause this movie I would say is a little bit not like scary, but it does have a little bit of like those spooky elements to it. Surprisingly, this came out in November, which I thought was super interesting. Like it didn't come out in October, because it definitely, I would say, is like a Halloween decom.
Yeah, it does fit more in the October feel than it does a November movie.
Definitely. So one of the couple characters that we have left is Sean, who is the like senior manager of the theater, and he is constantly like worried about his job. And so I wanted to just kind of preface this with a spoiler warning slash alert. I feel like this whole podcast is always like a spoiler alert. But Sean is the Phantom. And so I was honestly not expecting him to be the Phantom, because it felt like he was like too innocent, and it felt like really risky for him to like lose his job, because he's like worried like I'm gonna lose my job. And in the end he actually does end up losing his job. And so he says that he did this so that the Netter Mayor Meyer would notice him. So I don't know, it just felt like really weird, but like I feel like that was like one of the more feasible like characters who could have been the Phantom.
Yeah, I think the first time I watched it, I almost expected him because of his aggressive, like how how do you say it? How mm, I want to say aggressive, but he was very like everything has to be right. Everything if it goes wrong, he'll blame Peter or Pete. And I'm like, Mm, it was, yeah, I didn't. I kind of wanted to say I remember that, and then rewatching it, I almost forgot, and then I remembered. Oh yeah, I could see it, and yeah, I was right.
Yeah, it was definitely just a very interesting choice, but like you said, like thinking back about it, it makes sense and it was slightly predictable. So,
Mhm.
but I feel like any decom, no matter what it is, if it's a like more spooky decom or if it's uh any kind of decom essentially, it is predictable in every sense. I feel like that if it's not a true decom unless it's like predictable or there's like no character development at all. So, yeah, that's my thoughts. But in the end, I am very interested because he and kind of has a happy ending. I should say that Sean has this happy ending because he's offered a partnership with the guy who directed the Midnight Mayhem movie to like make it a story about him and all the stuff that he did. So in a sense, he actually kind of won because he's getting this huge offer and he's probably going to make way more
Yeah,
on.
been a manager at the movie. Yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah.
thought it
So I
was
guess
just interesting.
true. I would say I guess everybody wins there then at the end.
I would agree too. And also like the title, I feel like it's called Phantom of the Megaplex, the Sean Gibbons story. So essentially, my question is this supposed to be like the movie that they made?
Hmm. I never thought of that.
I don't know. I was
Yeah.
like Phantom of the Megaplex, that's the name of the movie. And I because I know there are several other DComs that kind of do that kind of like same vibe. So I just thought it was an
Mhm.
interesting thing. And I really didn't think about it until about like honestly like 2 minutes ago.
Oh yeah, I haven't thought about that either until you mentioned it.
Yeah, honestly, I would definitely like to hear what you all have to say. So send me a DCOM or not DCOM, a comment and or a DM and just let me know because I'm very interested. So let's talk about the final character who is Julie Riley, who is the mother of Pete and the gang. Her name is Julie. And so I just kind of wanted to talk about the fact that she like kind of gives off like helicopter like parents like vibes because you see like her always like coming after like Pete and making sure that he's taking care of his siblings, which is understandable because he is at work and has to take care of his siblings. So I thought that was very interesting, kind of like that dynamic. But in the end, I feel like this came out of left field. She ends up getting like proposed to,
Yeah,
which,
I think his name was George.
yeah, George. It was so, in my opinion, it was super interesting. Like it was a super like left field thing.
Yeah, I mean they did hint at it throughout the movie. I just thought it'd be either left on the back burner like or they would or she would reject it. I was thinking of one of those two things.
Yeah, I was kind of also like thinking that maybe like uh it wasn't gonna like be answered, but I was kind of glad that they did include it. Like it they kind of had that like big ending for someone in the movie. And then they kind of like make this really like weird, like interesting like werewolf story kind of like push at the end, which I was like kind of
Yeah,
interested about because I thought it was really like out of the ordinary.
yeah, it just sounded like a setup for a sequel, which doesn't. I wouldn't say what doesn't happen. Eh, it only happens with like their bigger blockbuster like type decoms.
Yeah, there are, I feel like several DComs where they do that setup for the sequel and it just kind of like never happens. This kind is definitely one of them. I mean, it's been 21 years. I'm pretty sure it's like safe to like say it's not happening. But I
Mhm.
just thought it was kind of interesting because I believe that the owner of the Megaplex's name was like Wolfgang. So were they like kind of like hinting at like a sequel where he's like a werewolf? It was
Yeah,
just interesting to me.
yeah, it could be.
Oh, I also wanted to quickly chat about Scary Terry. I totally forgot about her. She was so like funny to me. Another like fan favorite, like comedic relief character. She loves telling all these scary stories, and I just honestly enjoyed her like character along with some of the other characters. But I feel like she was probably my favorite of like the theater workers.
Yeah, hands. I would agree with you there, hands down. Um, the other ones aren't as memorable to me as she was.
Yeah, I also just remember like her like trying to figure out like what's going on with the projector, and I feel like she was just always kind of there taking things into her own hands, and that's what kind of like made her stick out. Maybe that's why she's my favorite, maybe like a slight bias, but it was just kind of interesting to have like the dynamic of like, and they all have super interesting like nicknames like Ricky Rules, Hillary Honey, question mark, Racy Lacey, just interesting names where it felt like cool to like kind of add on to that because they weren't essentially at the spotlight of this movie.
Yeah, they did get something there.
Yeah, I mean, I remembered their nicknames better than their actual names, so I feel like they did their job there.
Yeah.
Uh yeah, so that's pretty much all of like the major characters. There are a couple others kind of just sprinkled in there. But we are now going to move on to the plot of this movie and kind of just break down our thoughts and feelings about everything that happened and occurred throughout the movie. Starting off with the character Pete, who is the assistant manager that is set up. He loves this job and he works here most of the time. So already off the bat, we have our protagonist and we kind of have a storyline going. It's huge. It's huge, huge, huge theater. And so apparently there is a phantom of this megaplex. And the story is that when the old theater that movie Mason originally his family worked on was like caught in this original theater and then like demolished while they were still in there, kind of. And then they built this megaplex and it's like haunted. So kind of like basic ghost story, but I feel like they did a very good job of like kind of like building into it like early on in the movie that this was going to be a little bit more of a spooky movie, if that makes sense.
Right.
Uh, so now we are introduced to several other characters, like Sean, who is the senior manager, and the other employees, like we said, Racy Lacey, Scary Terry, question mark, all of them. And then we have Movie Mason, who is that elderly man whose family once owned this movie theater. He loves movies. He thinks he works at this megaplex, but he doesn't. And all of them are working together because they have a huge premiere at this megaplex for a new movie called Midnight Mayhem. So it's very, very interesting because they're like doing all this stuff to prep for this. And then they have this whole new added like phantom storyline that's coming in. So I feel like they covered like the bases because if you have a decom that is just like one single storyline throughout the whole thing, I feel like it kind of like stays very like boring in a way. But to have like multiple storylines, I feel like really added something to this decom, if that makes sense.
No, I agree. I do like. I wouldn't say overarching, but yeah, like you said, multiple storylines keeps things interesting.
Yeah, and I feel like it just kind of sets up like a common like goal and it just works so much better in my opinion than just a boring, settle, just one storyline. And so we then are introduced to the younger siblings, Karen and Brian, who are at this theater while their brother works because the mother will go out. She's widowed. So obviously, you know, it fits right in with that single decom parent vibes that I feel like every decom has, honestly.
Yeah, I think most of them do.
Yeah, and she is dating George, who, like we said, she does get engaged to at the end. So we are like, it is hinted like that their relationship might be going like maybe like up to the next level, if you will, taking things a little bit more seriously. And so now we see that Pete really wants nothing to do with his siblings at his work. So he puts them into a theater to watch a movie because, you know, they're at a movie theater. So it's only fitting. Uh, so then Karen ditches and she goes to see a horror movie with her friends. They're all trying to focus on like this big premiere that's happening, but now we have these problems that are being introduced at the Megaplex. So they're like, oh my gosh, it's a ghost. But it's so like weird because we were already introduced to like the ghost, like rumor storyline thing. And then like it is a ghost. So I felt like it was like moving really quickly after it like finally started to pick up. Like I said, it had that slow burn, but once things started like happening, I feel like it didn't stop. And I was kind of like a fan of that.
Yeah, that was where the excitement of the movie really kicked in for me as well. I mean, I wouldn't say most decoms have a slow start, but since this one did, I was when I first watched it, I was initially worried that I wasn't gonna really enjoy it. But then I'd say as soon as everybody like Pete and his siblings went to the theater, that's when things really kicked in.
Yeah, I agree. And then we have very interesting theories kind of floating around because these movies that are like getting ghosted or whatever all have similar titles like Cyclone Summer. And so there's a huge fan that like starts blowing people out of their seats, which is kind of like funny because I feel like that's not really like a
It's not
feasible
really
thing.
possible with that.
But it works because like I said, it is called Cyclone Summer. So that was like it was connected in that way, which I thought was cool.
Mhm.
They try to work together to discover this phantom. Who is it? Who's it going to be? And so there's this new movie, Midnight Mayhem. So they're like, what is going to happen? Like, we need to figure out what the plot of this movie is. So they go online and look up spoilers, which honestly I think is like super interesting because it is a premiere. So like the spoilers were already online, and also like the idea of the internet having such a huge role in like 2000. It was a
Yeah,
little, I thought it was an interesting choice.
yeah. I think it just started becoming common. I want to say in that time, maybe. I don't know too much about the earlier internet, but yeah,
Yeah, I'm pretty clueless. So I wouldn't honestly be able to tell you. But yeah, so they look up these spoilers. And so they want to make sure that the Phantom cannot sabotage the premiere. Along the way, they find this little hideout for Movie Mason, kind of off to the side, like a creepy little cove, I guess, that he hangs out in. So I thought that was very interesting, kind of to see that, uh, kind of have that storyline worked in. Because I feel like at that point they were really like trying to make you feel like Movie Mason was the Phantom, like he has this own little secret hideout, like he has to be the Phantom. But at that point, I still wasn't like buying that he was the Phantom.
yeah. Neither did I. There had to have been something further going on.
Yeah, I just I felt like there was other ulterior motives going on. So I wasn't like, oh my gosh, he's the Phantom. I honestly at this point really had no idea who it was. I felt like it could have been like maybe one of the employees, like maybe question mark, like someone who wasn't like a huge like main character, like he wants to get the manager job or something like that. I don't know. I don't really know what I was thinking, honestly. But now, not long after, the Phantom is actually revealed to be Sean, who the big head of this megaplex is at this premiere. And so he fires him. He's worried about losing his job, becomes the Phantom, and then gets fired because of all the things that he did. So it's a super like ulterior like motive. Like he thought he was doing something good, but he ended up really screwing that one up.
Yep. which is
So
kind of ironic.
it is ironic, and I think that's what like makes it good. Like the story is original, but there's also like little parts of it like inside that just like work very well. But like we said, he ends up getting a movie deal with the director of Midnight Mayhem to make a movie about all of his endeavors with the like Phantom of the Megaplex, Sean Gibbons story. So, like I said, it also like raised a question like, was this the like movie? I don't know. I feel like it's kind of like it would be cool, but I feel like I honestly don't think it is like the movie inside the movie.
Yeah, probably not.
I mean, it would have been cool, but if they really want to hire me to like make up decoms, I would be down to do that. But yeah, so from here we see the uh Pete, I should say, the like um manager, all-time manager, like the owner of the Megaplex, offers Pete the senior manager job, which I'm just going to be honest, a 17-year-old getting the senior manager job is something very interesting. Like at least getting offered. We'll get to the next part in
Yeah.
just a minute. But then he ends up turning it down because with his siblings like hanging out with him, he was able to like rediscover his like childhood, I guess. Like he doesn't want to waste his childhood and he wants the rest of the night off. And so it's so interesting. And then we have Caitlin, who is his girlfriend, kind of, they go out for a nice breakfast. And then George proposes to Julie and they have like a happy ending. Uh, it's so interesting. And then, like we said, they kind of fed into that werewolf story. I don't know. I thought it was I'm still a little confused about the ending.
Yeah, it's kind of random.
It was random. It just felt a little out of place for me, to be honest. But that pretty much covers the entire plot of this movie. Now, here at That's So Matthew, we take our ratings very, very seriously. So, honestly, I was thinking about this before we started recording. I was like, well, I really kind of want to give this movie like, I don't know, like probably like a 9, but I felt like that was a little too high. So I'm kind of like leaning towards like a like a 7.5 maybe. Like I really enjoyed it, but it did feel like there was something missing. Like it wasn't my all-time favorite decom. Like I wouldn't watch this every single day.
Yeah, I was gonna give mine a solid 7, just because, like you were saying, it it could have done a little bit more to make it stand out from the other Halloween type related decoms. But as of where it stands, it's not. It's just all right.
Yeah, it was just kind of a very classic, I hate to say it, like boring decom of in terms of plot. Like yes, there was action and there was stuff going on, but it did feel like there was some stuff like missing to the point where it would have made it like, oh my gosh, this is like my all-time favorite. Because I feel like this movie did have potential, but not necessarily like lived up to that potential. Like I feel like there could have been a lot more done in that sense.
Yes, I agree there.
So 7.5 and 7, so pretty much on the same page. Now I ask this pretty much every single episode: if this movie like came out in 2021, do we think that it would like still hold up like storyline wise, or does this movie feel dated in 2000?
Um, if they could remake the story with new assets, but like the visual presentation, I feel like is a little bit dated.
It is. I think this movie does a really good job of like not being super dated, but it does
Mhm.
just the whole story does feel a little bit like not 2021. And it's not like against the movie, it's just more there are other movies that hold up better. And it is a Halloween decom, and like the whole ghost storyline thing is kind of just, it's kind of overdone in that sense, but I did really enjoy it in the sense of 2000. So I'm right there with you on that one.
Yep. It does feel like something like on a 2000 scale, like it's right up that alley.
Definitely.
Like it fits the time period it was made in.
I definitely agree with you on that one. So this is also something I'm going to like start doing for like the Halloween episodes. I'm going to ask like a Halloween themed question just before we go here. And I guess today's question is, did you have like a favorite Halloween costume that you ever dressed up in as like a kid or like as an adult?
I think the last time I dressed up was I want to say 2019 or 18. Obviously because last year the pandemic, I couldn't really do anything. And so my favorite costume though, I want to say, there's so many good ones. It's hard to pinpoint like a perfect one, but I'm gonna narrow it down really quick. It was probably, I want to say it was the I remember it was it was my 5th or 6th grade. I don't remember the exact year, but we ended up transforming one of my old Mario costumes and we made it like a zombie Mario theme. And it was pretty cool how we like burned it, drenched it in fake blood. That was one of my favorites, all the makeuping and stuff.
That sounds
That was like
awesome. That honestly sounds super cool, like zombie, like creepy Mario. I'm honestly here for that one for sure. I would say my favorite. When I was little, I was the Tin Man from The Wizard of Oz. I feel like that would probably be my favorite. However, like the silver makeup was not my favorite. It was definitely, it left like a mark. It would, like was really hard to wash off. So I feel like the costume wise, that was very good. And I feel like the day this episode comes out, I should share a picture of that on my Instagram. So everyone, if you're listening to that, go this right now, go check that out. But I want to thank you so much for coming back on the podcast again. It was great to have you to kick off our spooky season episodes for 2021. But where can my listeners like find you on like Instagram or your socials, etc.?
Well, my socials right now is some review _ dude. I might make other socials in the future depending on how well I want to keep going with my Instagram. It's pretty fun with Instagram as of now though. So yeah, that's where you can find me. And thank you so much for having me again.
Of course, I had a great time. This was definitely an interesting one to talk about. So it was great to talk with you about it. And I look forward to talking about more DCOMs with you, of course. And if you guys want to follow me on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and Facebook, you can just look up at That's So Matthew. And if you would like to check out my website, just go to that'ssomatthew.com for all the fun stuff on there, as well as merch and other goodies. I will have a brand new Halloween inspired episode every single week of October. So make sure to stay tuned. And of course, you can listen to me wherever you get your podcasts. I hope everyone has an amazing rest of your day. And I'll see you all in another episode again soon. Bye.
Bye.